It's easy to look around and notice everything wrong in your city. In this podcast by Every Neighborhood Partnership, join Grace and Andrew as they invite friends, activists, pastors, leaders, and city workers to discover what's good in the neighborhood. Join us for insightful conversations that will encourage you to see your city and its people in a new way. Welcome back to What's Good in the Neighborhood. We get the opportunity today to have our first guest back for the second time, Carlos Huerta. Carlos is the executive director of Center for Community Transformation at Fresno Pacific University. And today, instead of talking about all the work that they do there, we really hone in on the partnership and the collaboration that's happened between EMP and CCT, because it takes a lot of people to make a school an actual community hub. And so we talk about that, the challenges, the successes, what it takes to be a genuine partnership and to be authentic in the community so that people trust you, what it takes to be a school that truly engages parents. And so we hope that as we step into this conversation with Carlos and our series Beyond the Bell, that you enjoy it and that it sparks some ideas for you.
Welcome to What's Good in the Neighborhood. My name is Andrew File, and with me is Mrs. Grace Berg. What? You don't like that?
It just sounded funny. It sounded like a 1950s radio show. And with me is Miss Berg.
Miss MS.
Hi, Andrew. Happy to be your co-host today.
Good. I'm glad. We'll keep that intro in. We are continuing our series called Beyond the Bell, where we're diving into issues that surround schools and really, thinking about our own experience, problems, hope, signs of pain that we see as we look around the school ecosystem. And bringing on some friends, partners, conversation partners. And we have our first or second returning guest. I don't know. Have we ever had a returning guest?
I think Carlos Huerta is our first returning guest.
Yes. Okay. So I want to welcome back Carlos Huerta, longtime partner at the Center for Community Transformation at Fresno Pacific. EMP and CCT have partnered in many ways over the years, from, faith and finances classes to we have a nonprofit faith-based cohort training program called Redemptive Impact Accelerator we do. And Carlos and I have been long friends in this work and in this process. And one of the things we do is we actually work with schools together. Mm-hmm. So Carlos has a really unique experience of supporting parents. In a previous job he used to have, traveled all over the United States as a parent engagement expert and trainer. And as we got together and as Fresno Unified launched the Community Schools Initiative, we just said, hey, let's keep our training together going. And so we actually have trainings coming up here this next month we're hosting together. And so as we think about schools, wanted to bring on Carlos. So Carlos, just how are you doing? And tell us a little bit about the schoolwork that CCT has done over the past years.
Absolutely. Well, good to be back with y'all as the inaugural returning guest. I got to add that to my LinkedIn profile or something.
Come on.
There. But all things are good. We're off and running into programming here at CCT. I think like most organizations that serve schools, we also revolve around the school calendar. Yeah. And also being parents of elementary and middle school age kids, it's going.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what some of the work that CCT has done with schools and maybe even your own journey, right? Mm-hmm. Like tell us a little bit about some of the parent engagement work you did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in my first iteration of being employed, I would say as a kid, my journey early on took me into Child Protective Services. But I quickly realized that CPS wasn't going to be the right fit for me, mainly because at 20 years old, I did not have the coping skills to thrive in that kind of setting. And I had the opportunity to go work for a local nonprofit that was doing training with school districts all across the country. We actually started off really small. We were in 4 states and a few school districts, and almost 4 years, we were in over 30 states.
Wow.
More than 300 school districts. It kept us on the road all the time. I mean, there was one year where I was on the road 160 days a year. And some of the beautiful pieces of that work was also getting to see neighborhoods and cities, and the way in some regions we started to see that parents and schools, because the whole idea of parent engagement and professional development for schools and communities was how do we get folks to collaborate together. But I was always shocked when we walked into the communities or neighborhoods and it felt like the school and the parents or the general community were adversaries. They kind of didn't want each other. There wasn't a lot of trust. There wasn't a lot of collaboration happening. And one of the things that we learned early on in research that we've known for decades is that children are more likely to be successful in school and in life when their parents are involved. And one of the biggest pieces for us was that parenting skills were identified really as leadership skills. If you can communicate effectively, if you could resolve and dissolve conflict, if you can set boundaries and expectations, the makings of a great parent are a great leader. And that was a lot of the work that we started to focus in on back in 2013.
Wow.
And thankfully, years later, after I had this winding journey of working in that nonprofit, going on to work in corporate America for a number of years, and then back to Fresno Pacific University at the center that I run, all that weird mix of life came together in this opportunity that was launched in 2021 by Governor Newsom's office in the program called Community Schools, which is a work that Andrew and I get to lean in to do together. And so, yeah, I think a lot of our role here at the center in partnership with the ENP has been to be this community-based partner that is helping the district have eyes and ears in neighborhoods. It's helping the folks that are being hired to quarterback this work in schools also be sensitive to what's happening in neighborhoods. I think a lot of folks come into this work saying, hey, the way we're going to help a neighborhood is with another food pantry or a clothing closet. But we know what happens when we only treat symptoms in community. And so a lot of this work collaboratively is looking a little bit deeper than those symptoms.
As you would think about a simple definition, the joke in community schools work is what is community schools, and like even the coordinators, they are always working at that. How do you define a community school?
Yeah. So for us, when we think of community schools, it's getting stakeholders, right? And when we talk about stakeholders, we're often talking about community members, we're talking about site staff, we're talking about students as well, and then the general community. So it's not just, I mentioned community members, but also parents, business owners, folks that have interest in a specific neighborhood and around schools. And so when we think through stakeholders, really the push for us is, can we help children thrive socially, physically, mentally, slide in the spiritually, but also academically, and realizing that it really does take a village for our children to thrive, for our students to thrive. And so while math and standardized reading test scores do matter, there's so much more that we could do through a model like community schools that has existed for decades. While it's new in a federal program like in the state of California, in a state program like California has instituted, it has existed for a long time. It's being able to serve children holistically. And so when I think through this lens of community schools, it's, hey, can we help these children thrive in those categories so that they don't only succeed in school, but also thrive in life?
Yeah, I mean, as the community schools idea got going, there were like a handful of schools in Fresno where like, oh man, that school has already operated that way for, the last 10 years, or that principal has always demonstrated, even if they've moved around the district, where like they recognize they need community partners. They've always had it. So the framework is new, the institutionalization, the money is new, but like, yeah, the idea is not as old as time. So thanks for the definition.
What do you think it takes? Like, what are the conditions and commitments that have to be made or put in place for what Andrew just described? Like, there's obviously people that have done it really organically, like you were describing, maybe principals or schools. But when we talk about community schools, like as a system, what will it take from it becoming like a community school, quote unquote, to an authentic community hub? Like, what has to happen in order for that to be reflected?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to try to not use so much nonprofit jargon.
Please. Yeah.
Yes. That's why we exist as a pod.
Absolutely. Because, we could use collective impact metrics and things like that. But I think it's your time to log off. If you have it.
My kids would go, "Womp, womp."
It feels like a Peanuts episode when the parents start talking. But I think one of the important pieces to come to is what I would say is more of a shared agenda, or like a vision for like, what is it that we're doing? What table are we building together? When it comes to students, so many people have so many different ideas.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest, if I ask a pastor what it would take for a student to thrive, they're going to say, go to church and pray some more. If I ask a business person, it's like, come work at my business. If I ask a therapist, they're going to say, go to therapy. If I ask an educator, they're like, just try harder in school. Not to summarize everybody in different sectors, depending on the area that they're coming from, are going to say, I have the one solution. Actually realizing that at the heart of this work is we do want our children to thrive. We want our students to thrive. And holistically, we do need all these pieces of the pie. It's not just going to be this one quick fix, banded solution. I also think through reciprocity, or even this idea of this work isn't transactional. I think that could be the danger of some of the work when it becomes institutionalized, like community schools. People see dollar signs on both sides, folks who like the districts who receive money to do this work, but also nonprofit partners and for-profit partners that are wanting to do contracting with schools. However, at the heart of this is eventually that money is going to go away. And for us, it's what's this long-term sustainability that we're leaving in our neighborhoods. We could create all these short-term programs that do great work for 6 months, but we've seen that time and time again with grant funding and with other types of funds when we're not really building capacity, or I would say trust, tables where people can come together and work together and plan together, be able to share resources. I do think at the heart of great partnership is resource sharing. We can talk about money. I think money is an easy place to start with. Is it really a partnership if there's no currency being exchanged? And I think that's a big piece in this work too, is, people, for all intents and purposes, are expensive. And the reality is, like, to sustain some of this work, like, people got to be able to sustain themselves and their families as well. So I think we can't remove that from the equation as well. But there is also the reality that there's so much work that's already happening in neighborhoods that do we really need to duplicate another clothing closet or a food pantry when we have amazing organizations like Neighborhood Industries that can do that kind of work and is doing that work? Or we have, the Quest Church across the street from Thomas Elementary that was already doing a food pantry. And so rather than Thomas Elementary, setting up a very expensive food pantry, it's saying, hey, we're going to partner with the Quest Church to do this work together. And in return, we're going to have these savings that actually could be reinvested back into the students to find other support systems for them in this process.
I want to double tap on what you talked about the faith aspect of, like, we get this critique sometimes, like, why don't you guys just share the gospel, or why don't you just evangelize and the rest will follow?
Yeah.
Because we believe the gospel is holistic work, us not only partnering with churches or faith-based organizations and being the hands and feet of Jesus is the holistic work. I don't know. I think some churches know that. Like, they know it in their head.
Absolutely.
And they have wonderful things like, what we just talked about, food pantries. And but when we work together, we'll have Erin Oswald on and she'll read us an amazing verse from Romans. But being that, like, we all need each other. And so I love that. I love that community schools, without even realizing it, is doing the work of faith, which is we need each other. Let's use the resources that are already here because we're better together, and it takes the village.
Absolutely. Well, and not to pull out one of my pocket sermons, right? But I often think through Elisha and in 2 Kings 4. And Elisha has this amazing encounter with this widow in her time of need, or her husband has passed away. But that situation doesn't happen if Elijah's not walking through the neighborhood, if he's not being known, if she doesn't know who this man is. So there's this proximity to Elisha to say, in this time of need, the church was there. And the church wasn't necessarily created at that time, but we see very similar context where, and I get some of this pushback sometimes in some of our programs too, is why would you help people start a business without, evangelizing to them? And it's like, hey, like stewardship is a biblical principle to us. Mm-hmm. And it creates an opportunity for us where, in our Spark Tank programs, it's all church-centered language. And so as folks are coming closer into the center of our work, we might not be evangelizing outright, but people know us by our words, by our deeds, who we say we are. Who we are at our center. They pop open our website every time they do something, and they will see pursuing God's design for community renewal. And so while we might not be preaching in the middle of spreadsheets, I think of Isaiah 58 as well. You have this group of people that were really frustrated with God, that they felt like God wasn't listening to them, and they were praying and fasting. And they said, hey, we choose not to eat, we choose to fast. Hey, we're not doing all these things. Why aren't you answering our prayers? And at the heart of it, we saw that these folks, rather than doing these activities that were honoring to God, actually were forcing their neighbors to work on Sabbath. Right? They were still having a lot of strife and quarreling in their context, where we see Isaiah really call out to them, is to say, like, I think you're really starting to focus on the wrong thing. It's not about the things that you don't do. It really is the things that you do. And what does that look like? It's freeing those who are chained. It's breaking oppression and injustice. It's feeding the hungry. It's clothing the naked. And so I find Isaiah 58 to be a really beautiful depiction of that kind of work as well.
Ever wondered what makes your neighborhood unique, or how the history of your city shapes the places you love today? Well, now you can explore the story of Fresno like never before, right from your car using the VoiceMap app. Introducing the Every Neighborhood Partnership Drive Tour, a self-guided audio tour that brings your community's history, landmarks, and stories to life. As you drive through local streets, EMP's Drive Tour will guide you with fascinating insights into the people, places, and events that have shaped your neighborhood. Whether you're discovering hidden gems, learning about community activism, or simply enjoying a fresh perspective on familiar places, this tour is a great way to connect with Fresno in a whole new way. So, what are you waiting for? Tap into the Every Neighborhood Partnership Drive Tour today on VoiceMap and get to know your community like never before. Download the VoiceMap app, search for the Every Neighborhood Partnership Tour, and start exploring now. Fresno's story is waiting to be discovered.
What's the motivator for you? A lot of people don't partner. So a lot of organizations are actually just like, it's not worth it. Like, I've tried, I'm tired, I don't want to work with people, I'm just going to do it alone.
People are hard.
Yeah, it's not worth it. Like, what brings you back? What gives you the motivation? I'm sure you have been kicked. You've had a contract go bad. You've partnered with somebody and then they, blow you up. Like, you've had it all. So like, what is the thing that is like, this is why I partner with organizations. This is why we believe in it.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah. I mean, like any leader who works collaboratively, like, things just take longer. Things are sometimes could be a little bit more expensive. They cause you to slow down and be thoughtful. And when I think through the heart of like wanting to do things on my own, it's oftentimes because of agility and speed, and like, we could do more programs and we can do these things. However, I also come from a perspective that if, programs were going to heal community, we would have done that already.
Right.
Because there's so many programs, and every time.
We're going to quote you on that.
Yeah, that's a pullout right there.
Every time we, have an issue, it's like, what program can we decide? What grant are we going to pursue? And you'll hear different adages, but I still think, that when it comes to collaborative work, like, trust is going to be a key part of that work long term, especially when it comes to again, I don't believe that CCT will ever be all things to all people. I think our goal is to be the right thing to the right people and being really clear on our mission, vision, North Star, and making sure that the things that we inherently have capabilities on and the things that we care about, we can lean into them as well as we can, better than anyone else. Like, those are the things that I believe about CCT. But I love my neighbors so much that it's also we put the onus on us and our team to be aware of, hey, like, you know, we don't necessarily, even though we work with schools, like, we don't offer youth. We do some youth programming, but we don't offer outright youth programming. And when folks come to us and say, hey, my student needs help with math or literacy, it's like, hey, this other program exists out there. When people come to us, you know, we do programming in Spanish. Our certificado programs in children's ministry and community transformation strategies, like, they're great programs. And then people come in and want to do other programming with us. However, we also do entrepreneurship programming at the center, but we don't do Spanish entrepreneurship. And so we've gotten that ask for probably the last 6 or 7 years. But because we have such a fantastic partner in Civic, the Central Valley Immigrant Entrepreneurship Center, that's not their name, but it's something like that. They do Spanish entrepreneurship work. And we refer every Spanish speaker to their center because they're going to be treated with great hospitality. Their values are very similar to us. The folks, Juan and Laura and their team, are amazing. They take such great care of our entrepreneurs, and they have access to different kinds of funds and resources that us as a faith-based institution sometimes aren't able necessarily to tap into. And I want to make sure that they are well taken care of. And I want to be clear for our team that when we think through our work, it's okay if we started the journey right at the beginning and we got them 30% of the way to their goal.
That's good.
It's okay if we move them on for the less than 70%. And I think sometimes the work could, and I guess I'll say it is like, CCT is not going to get the credit for that. And are we okay with that?
Well, and you can't quantify it. You can't write that down on your annual report.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And we sent so-and-so here.
Yeah.
We just had Stand Together come out to Fresno, which was so fun.
Who's Stand Together?
Yeah. What was that?
Who's Stand Together?
Oh, thank you, Andrew.
We stood together?
Why are you guys standing together? That's weird.
Stand Together is a national foundation that is resourcing nonprofits like ours, like EMP and CCT, to open up our eyes and ears to ideas around the country about organizations that are doing similar work. I believe his title is Community Director, Transformation Specialist. Who knows? But he came out, and one of the things that he said that I actually really loved, Andrew asked him, like, what have you seen in Fresno? Like, what? Like, give us the pulse. And Darren said, he was like, it's very unique what you have here, that y'all are willing to have the partnerships that you have and that you're so interconnected. He goes, I do not see that. And I think that it's what you're speaking to, which is that willingness to let someone go, and they're not going to be a number for CCT. But you did the work of connecting them. We do it all the time here. When I came on, literally frustrated. Like, Andrew would be like, they can go over there. I was like, what? Wait, what do we do? Like, what distinguishes us? It's something I've had to learn, is that there is just as much value in partnership because it interconnects the community and doesn't put the onus on the community member to then go do it on their own. We know the person, just do the connection. But what keeps organizations from doing that often is pride. They don't want to do it. And so the fact that we've chosen a more humble way helps expand our residents and our community members to what else is out there.
I mean, right now we have a staff member who's in your guys' launch pad.
Yep.
So one of our staff, Ying Shua, does our garden program. And I'm like, man, our programs are a little line of business, a little, thing that we're now going to try and market and sell to districts and then also get other people involved. And so I'm like, I could tell him that, walk a class, or CCT has a program that will help him develop this idea a little further, right? And it's like that. I mean, it's just great to say this is what we can do, and we have partners that are doing an amazing job we can work with.
Well, and not to stick another framework in here, but I think of the redemptive frame that we often work through of this idea of leadership being It could be exploitative. It could be ethical. We're not breaking the law. But for us, the call to our faith-based partners is how can we be redemptive? And one of, I think at the heart of that for me too, when I think of collaboration is, I mean, it'd be really expensive for me and it'd cost me a lot more to run a literacy mentoring program. It's not my background. It's not the things that I'm good at. Just like what you're saying is Yangshu being a launchpad, like our team is really good at that. We have Brian and Gladys in our team in entrepreneurship who can do those things. But you quantify that all the way across organizations when we try to be all things to all people. We see, and we don't necessarily operate out of a scarcity mentality. For us, is we serve a God of abundance. People clothed, fed, all the above, but at the same time, like even they think of these little birds that are, But I think through that reality that there is, especially being smack dab between Silicon Valley and Los Angeles, is there's this big concept of scale and getting big. But for us, it's really like, what does right sizing look like? What does sustainability look like? I could hire a bunch more staff. I can add a bunch more programs, but could we really sustain those things? And I think the call for us is, are we offering things of value that will really support people in their relationship with God, with self, with others, and with God's creation? And at the same time, are the things that we're doing the right things for CCT to do? And again, I come back to this concept of knowing who's in the landscape. I think some of that work is hard. You have to talk to people. You have to show up to people's events and meetings. And I think Randy, who is the founder of CCT, Randy White, he often used to say, people will know you care if you just show up. And I think the power of presence in collaborative work is also really important. One, for people to know that you're there. But two, also to be familiar with the things that they're doing. Because sometimes we lose touch with folks and then realize, I had no idea they were doing that now. Mm-hmm. And I'm really glad they are.
That's great.
Going back to the school side of this conversation, what do you think, what are the barriers that prevent schools from thinking about the community, from reorienting? Like, what barriers are you seeing that schools are refusing, missing the gap? Like, why aren't they moving towards community, towards listening? What is stopping this work?
Well, I think the first thing that I'll say is systemically, a lot of funding and support from schools come from standardized testing. They come from average daily attendance. And so from my perspective, when I hear that question, it's saying that, schools often are victims of the reality that if you're not moving towards excellence in these areas, there goes the resources that the kids absolutely need.
So break that down for people that don't actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So even the simple thing of butts and seats, right? Like we hear of kids being in class, like schools are getting paid an X amounts of dollar for a student being in class. And so when I think through like, hey, why isn't the school offering a mentorship program? Or why aren't they offering, you mentioned a gardening program or a sports clinic is, oftentimes like we're starting to see less kids come into the schools. Kids are starting to miss truancies at an all-time high across the country. And so the reality for our schools is they're getting less resources to support the same number of kids. And I think the conversation then shifts into like come back to this phrase that I used, or this word stakeholders, is holistically like how are we ensuring that kids get to school? One is families need to see the value of education. Families are very stressed right now as post-pandemic. A lot of things continue to change in the landscape. Two is, I continue to see this where I hear from business owners in neighborhoods that are just like, hey, these kids aren't going to school. They hang out in my parking lot and they just leave chip bags or like really random things. And so this business owner cares about these kids. He cares about them not trashing his parking lot, but that person also cares. And so how do we include a person like that says, hey, I think I could support something to help kids in this transition back into school. So there's a lot of creative conversations around that area.
So are you saying that like schools only care or invest, sometimes a limiter or a systemic factor is that schools only care about making sure kids are there, or their like resources prioritize that because that's how they get more money, or they only are investing in things, or they have less money to invest in other programming?
If I can go and re-record what you just said, I think I would have just said that instead. Yeah, I think that the prioritization, right, is like, how do we make sure that kids are in school? And at the same time, how do we make sure that they're at reading level, that they're scoring well in math? So those are often the three top indicators for schools. And so when folks are saying, well, what about food? Or what about, I don't know, housing? We could talk about a lot of these root problems that exist, root causes that exist on why kids aren't getting to school. I think it's so much more complicated than, as I mentioned earlier, one sector solving all things for all students. And so, but we do know that when kids are fed, right, they're going to do better in class. They're going to be able to focus. When kids have a good night's rest, they're able to do well in school. But yeah, I would say that systemically, there's some of those realities as these large, stodgy institutions, especially when we think of, I'm not going to pick on Fresno Unified, but I'm going to pick on Fresno Unified is they're the third largest school district in the state of California. And with that is institutions move really slow, right? Change. And I think of, hate to bring in more frameworks, but I think of Stefan de Beer, right? He has this framework of the process of decay, right? And understanding how urban communities didn't decay in 2 to 3 years. It took 10, 15, 20, 30 years of constant disinvestment or even just lack of care for things to end up the way that they did. And healing, oftentimes that this theology of process often requires a lot of attention on the things that were ignored for so long. And so when we look at the work of schools, what does that look like, not just in the school system when it comes to teachers or school psychologists, but at the same time, families. We want families to be engaged, but oftentimes the only reality, again, we're talking systemically here, is when we talk about LCAP or LCFF or things like Local Control Accessibility Plan.
These are all plans that they need parent input on, right, that schools have.
Got to make sure I don't talk in acronyms the whole time.
But I think the point that you're making is that at worst, schools will often engage parents only as much as they have to. At best, parents are called up to take responsibility of not only their kids' education, but invited into engage at a school.
Well, and some of the reality too is like we see in neighborhoods, like parents are pointing fingers at schools and schools are pointing fingers at parents. And I think that distrust really hurts our students when the expectation really should be on both parties.
Right. Yes. A shared responsibility for the child.
There's an ownership there.
At Every Neighborhood Partnership, we believe that strong, vibrant communities start with engaged and empowered residents. To make that happen, we need your help. Our mission is to connect neighbors, create opportunities for local leadership, and transform neighborhoods through education, collaboration, and advocacy. Every dollar you donate goes directly to supporting programs that make a real difference. Whether it's providing land use education, elementary literacy mentoring, or healthy spaces to help kids and our families grow. When you donate to EMP, you're not just giving money, you're investing in a future where every neighborhood in Fresno has the tools and resources it needs to thrive. Your contribution, whether big or small, ensures that our communities have a seat at the table in the decisions that affect them most. So if you believe in seeing students excel, our community members healthy and whole, and our neighborhoods thriving, we invite you to make a donation today. Just visit everyneighborhood.org or tap the link in the show notes to give. Your support helps develop the next generation of leaders like Fresno depends on it. Donate now to Every Neighborhood Partnership.
Okay, I think when you're mentioning like it takes both, like parents and schools together, I guess even just thinking through my own personal experience, like I guess the hot take question is parent engagement a luxury?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes. Because obviously, like, I think every parent would say, I want to care or I want to be involved, right? There's a million factors as to why those things don't happen. But yeah, what is that relational dynamic between a school and a parent? What are the signs of hope in that, and what are the signs of need or barriers to entry for parents and schools alike, right? Because it's a reciprocal relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's a great, it's a reality. I even think of like my personal experience, like son of two immigrant parents, largely raised in a single parent household most of my teenage years, and my mom working 2 to 3 jobs. Like she wasn't showing up to PTA meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning.
That's right.
Sometimes like I stop by and I want to go to a PTO meeting, but that meeting is at 8:30 in the morning after drop off. I was like, I really can't do that. It's so that level of parent engagement when it comes to school system updates, decision making, oftentimes is pretty. The phrase wouldn't be selective, but it is very much a luxury. I think a stay-at-home parent, folks that work a different kind of schedule, oftentimes the reality too, though, that I think through parent engagement is that these systems, and Andrew mentioned this, aren't always necessarily set up that way. There are some barriers or bowling lane bumpers, if you will, that almost prevent parent engagement beyond like the traditional school hours, because if someone sticks around, it's a different rate. That gets expensive really quickly for schools. And so parent engagement largely happens between 7:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. And as someone who oftentimes doesn't finish a day to 4:30 or 5 o'clock, there's no other option.
Right.
I think through even the work at like CCT, because we are such a people first organization, one of the realities for us when we hire staff is also understanding that, because we serve low to moderate income folks in all of our programs, and that's who we exist to serve, oftentimes they are working there during the day. So they're not going to show up to Launchpad at 9 a.m. They're going to be able to show up from 6:30 to 8:30 in the evenings, and that's when we're going to run courses. And so understanding that we are people first means that our operations revolve around serving people really well. And so that means serving people on evenings and weekends. And so as the executive director of our center is like, how do we make sure that our staff is well cared for when they're serving people? That work is hard, especially when you're holding space for people. And schools, unfortunately, systemically, one, they're not set up to do that way. In my heart of hearts, I would like to believe that schools care about parent engagement and leaders care about parent engagement, but so much of the system force them to operate in this box. And I think that's some of the difficulties of institutions at times.
Well, Carlos, we've covered a lot of stuff, and there's so many more things. As you can tell, this is a man of wisdom and a lot of different experience. Really appreciate our partnership, our friendship over the years. I really encourage you to check out CCT's website and social media. They do a great newsletter because if you don't know, they offer just such wide offering of training and resourcing. And so I'd encourage you to check that out. Anything you want to plug, Carlos, that you guys are working on, or any kind of new things, or anything there?
Well, and I would say that there's so many organizations that are in neighborhoods developing healthier people and healthier neighborhoods. And our perspective is, who is serving the leaders and those nonprofits. And I think that's a big heart of why CCT exists, is helping folks find, one, joy and mission, but two, also sustained for the long term. And so we have all kinds of programs, from entrepreneurship programs to, Andrew mentioned earlier, our Redemptive Impact Accelerator, which trains faith-based nonprofit leaders over a multi-month program. But yeah, the opportunity for me, I would say, is jump on our website, cctfresno.org. There is always a calendar of events and trainings. Most of them are free to low cost. I think we have so many generous supporters and funders that help subsidize our work to make sure that we, there is a perspective from us too, saying that, transaction is important. And so having some skin in the game is important for us too, depending on the program. But all that to say is, would love to see, folks reach out and chat. And I know we mainly focus on schools today, but as I mentioned before, most of our work revolves around serving churches,
Yeah, you guys do so
businesses,
much. Yeah.
and nonprofits, that we're always happy for a new conversation and a new friend along in the way.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Carlos. Grateful for you.
Yeah, appreciate you guys.
Thanks for tuning in. If you want to find out more about EMP, you can visit us at everyneighborhood.org or follow us at EMP Fresno. Every Neighborhood Partnership and this podcast exists to activate, equip, mobilize, and transform here in Fresno and beyond. If you liked what you've heard, please share and review what's good in the neighborhood wherever you listen. We'll see you next time.